Hey everybody, Jason Wheeler here, one of the pastors at North Park Church in Columbus, Nebraska, and I'm here with your life group application questions for the week. And you guys know we're done with our Kingdom series. And before we move on to our study of Ephesians, this week we're talking about Israel, Hamas, and you, as you well know, because there's a lot going on with Israel right now, right? I'm sure that it has not escaped any of you, and I know that the message was very encouraging, helpful for me. I hope that it was for you. There were several verses. We used various scriptures, and I hope that you guys have your outline in front of you there and some notes maybe that you took on Sunday so you can refer back to some of those. I'm going to read John 8:39 through 47. You see it on the screen in front of you there. Clearly talks about the two different sides here. And remember, that's one of the points that Pastor Lynn talked about. There are two sides. It's not Israel and Hamas. It's actually God and the devil. So I'm going to read those verses right now. You guys follow along and be thinking about, praying about what God might have been working on your heart with in regard to the message on Sunday. And when I get done reading these verses, we will go ahead and get into our discussion questions. So here we go. Again, John chapter 8, verses 39 through 47. They answered him, and they are some Jewish religious leaders that Jesus is talking to at this point. So, not exactly the same as the Muslim leaders that we're dealing with Hamas or that we're discussing in the message. But at the same time, we are still dealing with some people that are working for the wrong side, right? They're on the wrong side. So they answered him, "Abraham is our father." And Jesus said to them, "If you were Abraham's children, you would be doing the works Abraham did. But now you seek to kill me, a man who's told you the truth that I heard from God. This is not what Abraham did. You are doing the works your father did." They said to him, "We were not born of sexual immorality. We have one Father, even God." Jesus said to them, "If God were your Father, you would love me. For I came from God, and I am here. I came not of my own accord, but He sent me. Why do you not understand what I say? It is because you cannot bear to hear my word. You are of your father, the devil, and your will is to do your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, and he does not stand in the truth because there's no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks out of his own character, for he is a liar and the father of lies. But because I tell the truth, you do not believe me. Which one of you convicts me of sin? If I tell the truth, why do you not believe me? Whoever is of God hears the words of God. The reason why you do not hear them is that you are not of God." So clearly, we see two sides there. And that was the first point that Pastor Lynn made in the message on Sunday. There are two sides. And it's not Israel and Hamas. Remember Ephesians, the battle that we fight is not against flesh and blood. It's a spiritual battle, right? And that's what we're dealing with here. And the second point that Pastor Lynn made was that there are two Abrahams and the land belongs to only one. Now, the religious leaders that Jesus was talking to in our key verses there, they were Jewish, and they would have agreed that Abraham, the father of Isaac, that Abraham is their father through Isaac, which is different than what Hamas or the Muslims would say. They would say that the Bible, that Scripture got it wrong, when in fact they have twisted Scripture to say that really the land belongs to the descendants of Ishmael. But there are two Abrahams, the land belongs to only one, and Scripture makes it clear that the land belongs to the descendants of Isaac. And then the third point that Pastor Lynn pointed out on Sunday was that there are two futures and only one is blessed. There is the promise of Ishmael that we see clearly from Genesis 16, and then there's the promise through Abraham and his son Isaac in Genesis 12. And only the promise through Abraham and his son Isaac is blessed. So keeping all of that in mind, really be praying about maybe how you've been dealing with this Israel Hamas stuff lately. I know ever since it happened, it's been really on my mind and in my heart. I'm sure it has yours too. I hope it has yours. And we'll jump into our discussion questions now. For question one, has Israel been important to you? Like historically in your life, has Israel been important to you? And then have recent events been important to you? I'm sure after the message they are, but were they leading up to the message? And why should they be? Be considering what you've learned. And go ahead and pray about, and talk about question one now. Okay, and moving on to question two. So times like this can be very, very difficult for obvious reasons, I think. But times like this can also be very helpful, right? Remember Romans 8:28, God will work all things together for the good of those that love him and are called according to his good purpose. And this is all under God's sovereign power. It's not some crazy mistake. He's in control. He knows what's happening. So for question two, I want you to pray about, think about, talk about how times like this, with what's going on in the Middle East with Israel and Hamas, and there are always wars going on, but isn't it telling how much attention is given to this one with Israel? So how are times like this difficult for you, and how might they be helpful? How might God want to help you? How might this aid in your sanctification? Pray about that and talk about that now. For question three, we know that the battle is the Lord's. We know that. And keeping in mind some of the difficulties that come with situations like what's happening in Israel right now, or in Gaza right now, keep in mind that the battle is the Lord's. And think about some of the examples from Scripture. I know that Pastor Lynn talked about some in the message, when we really need to keep in mind that the battle is the Lord's, and some crazy, pretty terrible stuff was happening then too. How can this truth help you? How can it help you in times like this? Pray about that and talk about that now. Okay, and moving on to question four. Hopefully, the message clarified some things for you, helped to clarify your thinking on the subject. It can be pretty tough to know that we must choose a side, and the side that clearly is God's side, even though it's God's side, that doesn't mean that everything that happens from that side is pleasant, to say the least. So it can be tough. We need to have our thinking really clear and our trust in the Lord on this. So how has this message clarified your thinking? And then how can this message and what's happening today help you to live a life of holiness? Remember, Pastor Lynn talked about that. And I'd like you to pray about that and talk about that now. Okay, for question five, fifth and final question. Have you chosen a side? Choose this day whom you will serve, right? Joshua 24:15. And that's really what we must take away from this. There are two sides, and you need to be on the side of the Lord. Have you chosen a side? How do you know that you've chosen a side? And then, what is one thing that God might have you do with what you've learned in this message? Something that you can actually apply, put into effect. That's question five. And that is it for this week, guys. As always, I want to quickly encourage you to keep in mind all of the content that comes out every week. Go to the website, www.insidenp.com, or get the Inside NP app from your app store. And don't forget about Pastor Ryan's midweek message. Don't forget about Jonathan Kaufman's youth lesson. And of course, all of that stuff is archived there as well, so you can go back and watch any of it and keep up with it. And if you need to reach out to me, you know how. And Lord willing, I will be back with you guys next week.